us live at the actual time. I'm actually going to move my camera. Hello, everybody. Welcome to day 2 or day 1 of the Dreaming Conference. If you might have joined us yesterday for some workshops, unfortunately, the tornado siren is going off outside, not because there is a tornado, but because they test it all the time. So if you can hear that, I'm sorry. But welcome. We're happy to have you here. I'm going to be moderating the session today. My name is Gray Idle. I am based in Birmingham, Alabama. And then we have Adam Erstelle leading the call today. I don't know if you can hear that, but it is very loud. But we're going to be talking about multi-language account engagement forms today with Adam. Make sure that you are asking your questions in the chat, ideally in the Q&A section. I'm going to be posting a few housekeeping notes in the chat here in a second. But these sessions will be recorded and they'll be available after the event so that you can go in and make sure that you access all of these recordings. Adam, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. I do want to take a second to thank our incredible sponsors. You may have seen us talk about this on other sessions you've attended, but we are very grateful for all of the people who've supported the Dreaming event. I'm seeing a lot of people hopping in here. That's great. Hello from Oxford, Mississippi, but also a Tuscaloosa native. Awesome. All right, Adam, let's hop to the next slide here. Oh, and then I'm going to turn this over to Adam to walk through our agenda, but then I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to share them there, and we'll follow up and make sure that they're addressed. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Gray. Welcome, everybody. Hope the keynote was educational and fun for you. Today, we're going to talk about multi-language forms in account engagement, and I'm going to just briefly talk about some of the current approaches that we've seen out there today. Some of the challenges that we have with those current approaches. I'm not going to try to dwell too much on those, and I want to try to focus on what a different solution might look like. I'm going to do a couple little demos, one of the front end, so to speak, user experience, and hopefully we have some time to dig into the code. I don't know if it's too early for a code session, but we're going to do it anyways. All right, so let's get going. One of the most popular ways to approach the multilingual form is to have dynamic content in account engagement, relying on a custom field that you might have captured the language earlier, and then you'll include it in all of the forms. You'll have layout templates and forms for each language. You'll have dynamic content which figures out which form it should render. And then, we'll check out at the end, gathering the information from the forms. If it's a short period of time, we have to look at all of the form performance for each language. Looking at what that might, see inside account engagement, you'll actually have, a Spanish form, a French form, and an English form. When you're looking at the actual dynamic content, right, you might embed your iframe code here. And, for those who work with dynamic content a lot in account engagement, when you're looking at the actual screen here, you don't really get any previews. You don't get anything helpful, right? You have to dig straight into the HTML. And there isn't really a whole lot of guidance or help showing you exactly what's going on unless you put in some HTML comments, which is best practice. And we all do it, right? So it can be challenging to troubleshoot, diagnose, and all that fun things. Now, from a visitor experience, right, it can be annoying, I guess, when I visit the form, right? Because as a visitor who might be fluent in a different language, I'll visit the page and I'll likely get the default language because account engagement doesn't know what language I want. Right. And then, maybe I'll try to use a pick list or a dropdown to select the language that I really want. And maybe that form won't instantly re-render in my language, right? So it can be a little bit annoying. People who are multilingual or who have different language backgrounds, as sad as it is to say that they're kind of used to this on the internet, but it's still not a great experience. On the marketer side, right, there's a lot of assets we have to create. We have to create all the forms. Maybe you have to create a bunch of templates, dynamic content. There's just a lot that we have to do for every form. Reporting after the fact, right, it's split across all of those forms. And then as time goes on, depending on what kinds of automations we want to put in place, it adds to the complexity with having, engagement studio programs and automations. It can be a big mess. So what can that look like if we take a slightly different approach? And what I'm going to show is a single account engagement form, and it's going to have placeholders for the text. With this approach, we have fewer assets to create and manage, right? We have one form, we have one layout template, and it can support as many languages as you want. Dynamic content has the limit of 25 variations. I don't know too many companies that have 25 languages that they're trying to render, but in that situation, this different approach allows you to support all languages if you really wanted to. The reporting and automations that I was talking about earlier, it's all streamlined because you have a single form that's collecting all this information. And the approach that we're taking, it does require a little bit of JavaScript knowledge, and we're going to get into that really soon. So this is an animation of the form and the experience, right? You can see as we pick the language, all of the labels, all of the values, they instantly change, allowing someone to, very quickly make the language choice that they want. Filling out the form, right? We'll see that we get some error messaging, and those are also all instantly changed to the different languages as we complete filling out the form. The thank you message is also translated based on, me wanting Spanish, but I think it's a pretty cool approach to multilingual forms. The QR code on the side, if you scan it with your phone or whatever, it'll take you to dev.org for account engagement, and you can kind of play around with it there. All right. What does this look like inside account engagement? Here we have the form fields. We can see on the left-hand side that we have placeholders, right? Square brackets. We can see that we want to have the translation for language, first name, last name, etc. We can do the same thing for the submit button text. And what we do here is we put a little bit of JavaScript on the below form, which will capture the currently known prospect language. And then we call our main JavaScript to do the translations there on line 5. If we're looking at the thank you page, right, we have thank you content of the thank you message. And then we have very, very similar code to the one we saw earlier where we're getting the prospect language and we're kicking off all of the translations. All right, let's go to a little bit of a real-time demo. So this is the form that we saw earlier. In the interests of time, I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, but we can see very, very quickly, like everything changes here. We're not doing any page refreshes or page submits. This is all instant and real time. Seeing in the chat here, Amy, are you able to translate the drop-down values? Absolutely, and I'm going to show that right now. This is our multi-language form inside of account engagement. If I go to edit this form, we see our fields here. And if I edit this industry field, and I go to our values, we see that the value that we're saving in account engagement when the form is submitted is the English word that we're working with, right? It's going to make the sync to Salesforce work with, a restrictive pick list, which is only in one language. And for the label or the value we're displaying in the dropdown, this is where we're going to put our translation. I'm going to cancel out of here. And
Adam, we do have a couple other questions. I don't know if you want to surface these now.
Yeah.
Does the code or JavaScript change if the Pardot form is embedded elsewhere? So if we use that form, for example, on our website as opposed to on a Pardot landing page.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
the other question, can the form detect the language based on locale? Yes, it does that too. And I'll get to that very soon. So how does this work? First thing that we are leveraging here is a very common templating language called handlebars. This has been used in web apps and front-end development for a while. It's nothing new. And if I'm being honest, when account engagement announced that they had handlebars merge language, this is the first thing I thought of, and I thought it was going to be super amazing. And then we got what we got, which works too. But how it works is basically we have a little bit of HTML with placeholders, right? We're very familiar with that, with working in account engagement with HTML or even PML from before. So it should look and feel very, very familiar. We have our HTML up here. We have the values that we're going to put in. And then at the end, we get what we're hoping to see. Now, what's kind of cool is we can do some nested input objects, right? So we're starting to add hierarchy to our variables. And if you're remembering some of the account engagement recipient, right? Recipient would be the outer layer, and then we have first name, last name, things like that. So it should still look and feel very familiar, a little bit of dot notation. Taking the approach that we're working with, right? The outer thing is I18N, which is very short for internationalization. And then we have our variables or our placeholders, first name, last name, industry, whatever we want to put in here. Now, one of the challenges with using the double curly braces inside of account engagement is that on a thank you page, account engagement will say, hey, you're trying to use double curly braces. I'm thinking that that's not a valid account engagement thing to do. So with the JavaScript that I put together, I'm like, okay, fine. We won't use curly braces. We'll use square brackets. So that's kind of the pattern that we have here. And as I mentioned earlier, right, you can have the placeholders as labels. So we have the two square brackets, internationalization, and then the keyword that we are making up ourselves. Now, to put this together, we need to actually store all those translations somewhere, right? There's no magic that does any AI translating or anything like that. I mean, it could be built, but that's outside of the scope of this talk. What we have for this example is all of the translations are stored in a JavaScript object, right? And it's nested where the first layer is the language code, right? English, French, Spanish, whatever languages you want. Then the second layer is literally the word or the characters I18N. And then lastly, the third layer is each translation. And what does that actually look like? So in our JavaScript code, it's going to look something almost identical to this, but with just more keywords that we're translating. We have our language here on lines 2, 8, and 14. the I18N keyword, just to help make things differentiate them from the other merge fields that we might be using in account engagement. And then all the things that we want to translate. Now for our demo, we have quite a few fields here, and there's actually a couple more that I added for handling not you, that not you link. But this is what it will look like if you go and inspect the code, or if we have time that I can actually show you the code. We do use JavaScript to pull this all together. And what the JavaScript does is, the very first thing the JavaScript does is it replaces all those square brackets with the curly braces to make the handlebars JavaScript templating engine be happy. And that's purely to get around account engagements, validation for when you save the form. Next thing it's going to do is it'll determine, what language should I be rendering to the visitor who's, taking a look at this form. It's going to first look to see, did the prospect already tell us what language they want to read? If they have, then obviously we want to use that one. And if they haven't, next we're going to say, hey, did the form previously specify the language, right? Handling the scenario of partially filling out the form, hitting submit, and they forgot to put their last name in the form, or any other required field or validation error. If those two scenarios don't apply, we're going to say, hey, does the browser know what language I should be using? And that's to Amy's, was it Amy's question earlier? Someone had asked in the chat, can it use the locale for grabbing this? And this is right where it does that. Now that we know what language we should try to render the form, then what we're going to do is the JavaScript will read the HTML and it'll use that as the handlebars template. And then it says, hey, handlebars, I want to apply these translations. And that's basically what the JavaScript does. Now, there's a few places where we have to put this JavaScript in order to make this all work. We need the brains of the JavaScript, so to speak, somewhere on the page, right? It can be the layout template. You can have it in an external file. There's a lot of ways that you can store and reuse JavaScript. So for the brains, that's really what you want to do. Then we're going to have the translations, right? And depending on your website and your forms, you might choose to have, a big giant set of translations that handles everything, or you can choose to have form-specific translations, right? It depends on how you want to manage all of those translations. Things like that. The JavaScript itself, it handles the page and the form rendering. It handles error messages. It handles the thank you page. It tries to take care of everything. All right. So I've got a code here to get a QR code to actually go and get the code from the blog post that I wrote to put all this together. Gray, how are we doing here for questions? Is there anything that I didn't grab?
Yeah, we've got a few here.
All right.
Let me just start at the beginning to make sure that we're answering them in order. Raphael said, what if there is a language not left to right, but also right to left? Have you encountered that before, Adam?
I haven't encountered that. I would guess that the JavaScript should handle it fine. It would be more on the page design to make sure that that's correctly handled. But I mean, the JavaScript is, I don't want to say it's open source, but we give everyone the source. And then, if there's something that it doesn't do well, make the changes, let me know, and I'll see if I can incorporate it in for everybody else.
Awesome. Thank you. What about the language of the landing page that form might be hosted on? If that language was, for example, French, can it automatically associate that form with that language and display the correct multi-language form?
The JavaScript could be enhanced to take that into consideration, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to answer all these when I get to them here in just a second. Hold on one second. There was another one here. Drop-down values. Yep, maybe I think we might have answered all of them. Yes, Vera, it does work if we use iframed forms on our website. That was another question that had already come up. And yes, we very often use forms on other sites outside of just Pardot or account engagement landing pages. There's the Pardot for whoever called that out. But yes, it will work that way as well.
All right, then let's go and actually take a look at the JavaScript code. I like that last comment, but I'm not going to comment on it right now. All right, layout templates. We're going to go and edit this template so we can take a look at the code. Here we have the JavaScript code. Oh, is this? I'll make this bigger for everybody. Is this good? Hopefully it's not too small. If it's still too small, I don't know, pipe in chat and we can make it bigger. This is the layout template, our account engagement layout template for the actual form. Here we have the script to the handlebars JavaScript templating engine. The next script we have is where we're setting the languages that we support. So we have English, French, and Spanish. Next, we have the actual translations for each language, right? So for the English language, our internationalization keys are first name, last name, blah, blah, blah. We have the same keys for French and the same keys for Spanish. And yes, I might have used some GPT products to come up with these translations. Don't use them blindly yourself because I don't know these languages. Now down here, starting on line 79, this is where we have the brains of our translation. I don't want to call it translation engine or translation code, right? First thing that we're going to do is this is the code here that converts our square brackets into curly braces. We take a look for any Pardot errors, and we will kind of handle replacing that text ourselves. Here, starting at line 91, we do the same thing where we say, if we detect the text, is this not you? You know, that link that you can click to clear your cookies, so to speak. We have some code that handles that as well. Then what we do is we start the actual process of taking the HTML. Excuse me. We take the actual HTML and we turn it into a template that we can then give to handlebars. Now we're starting on the actual language detection. Like, what language should we try to use? So we're going to grab the browser language, and this uses a JavaScript API, I guess, that lets us get technically it's the locale, and we're only grabbing the first two characters, right? So for the locale of EN_US, we only really care about the EN. But if you wanted to have translations that were locale specific, you could just adjust this to not chop it up. So we know the browser language, right? We're going to see what are the allowed languages, the languages that we actually have translations for, right? And that was earlier on. I'm going to scroll up there, right? We say that we support English, French, and Spanish. And this JavaScript code will take a look at and figure out, hey, if someone is Turkish, right? We don't support the Turkish language. So we're going to kind of default it to English, just like you would kind of expect. So this is kind of looking at the languages and trying to figure out what it should do. Which language should it actually pick based on all of the information that we have. Now that we have figured out what language should we actually render, then we can apply the translations. So we'll take our template, we're going to give it all of our translations, all of the languages that we have, and then handlebars.js is going to do the actual translation for us. Then what we do is we swap out the HTML of whatever's currently rendered with the translated HTML. And then a couple housekeeping things. That's basically what our JavaScript does. So, there's, I don't know how many lines of JavaScript are here. It's a bit, 148. So like 120 lines, 130 lines of JavaScript, although a lot of them are the translations. So if we go 80 lines of JavaScript, it's not too bad. Based on some of the things that were called out in the chat here, right? We could enhance this to pull in, maybe it's a page like sitemap page language or something like that. And then we could enhance, where'd that line go? We could enhance this line to, prioritize in the right order based on, whatever you think you need.
We've got some good questions here in the chat. Just want to surface these. We've only got a couple minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to all of these.
Sure.
Can different completion actions be triggered on the form based on the language? I.e. a specific autoresponder within or for a specific language.
Yeah, that one is. So with this approach, right, we have the language as a field on the form, right? Anytime the form is submitted, we're capturing the language for that person. And then what we could do in the actual form is we could have conditional completion actions that says, if the form is a certain language, then send a different autoresponder. Now, we do have the limitation of 6 conditionals in the completion actions for a form. So there's that limitation that could be challenging. But I don't know, I would almost argue that it's unlikely that most organizations are doing 6 or more translations on a form. Although I'd love to be wrong and call me out in chat.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one real quick. So Vera asked, do I need a different layout template for each form where we're using different fields on that form? Or can I just list all of those possible fields in one, and all that JavaScript on one template?
Yeah, I think we could organize the JavaScript in a way where the brains is held somewhere and then the translations are on each form. Awesome. It can get a little bit trickier because you have to start putting things in multiple spots, but it's just organizing JavaScript, and depending on the talents of your team, it's more than possible.
Okay, 2 more that are kind of related. Is there a list of I18N keys so that they can, update the code for all languages they want to support? Is that something we have? So
the I18N keys, like these are made by you, right? So depending on your form, which fields, etc., like whatever. Oh, I think I just broke by trying to hit the back button. That's fun. Oh, did it come back? Nice. All right. Right, so all of these keys, these are entirely defined by you. So the list is whatever you choose it to be.
Okay, and we got one more question. Is this JavaScript in the blog that you linked for everybody to reference?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. I also did just launch a survey. We've only got a couple seconds left here, but thank you all for joining us. You will, again, these will all be recorded and you will have access to these on demand after